Yes, friends, how are you? By the early 1980s, the Middle East had become the epicenter of one of the most brutal and prolonged conflicts of the late 20th century, the Iran-Iraq War. This war was not simply a territorial dispute, it was an ideological and strategic confrontation that would shape the region for decades to come. By 1982, the war had entered a critical phase. Iran had successfully pushed back some of Iraq's advances and had begun launching counterattacks. Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, had fortified its military defenses and was preparing for a long, grueling conflict. But Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, placed a firm condition. Peace negotiations or ceasefire would not be considered as long as Saddam Hussein remained in power. This uncompromising stance meant that the war, which had already taken a heavy toll, would continue without pause. A third key actor emerged in this conflict, the United States alongside Saudi Arabia and Iraq. Initially, their interest was in maintaining regional stability and protecting oil supplies. However, the prolonged conflict created new dynamics. Military resources that had previously been directed against Israel were now being redirected toward Iran, altering the regional balance of power. Despite receiving assistance from neighboring Arab states, Iraq was unable to deliver a decisive blow to Iran. The Iranian military, though exhausted, was resilient, and this prolonged stalemate created anxiety among surrounding nations. They feared that if Iraq were to fully attack their territories, they would be vulnerable and potentially face severe losses. By the third year of the war, casualties had escalated dramatically. Iran had lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians, while Iraq also suffered substantial losses. Saudi Arabia, though trying to support Iraq, faced limitations in both manpower and logistics. The scale of the conflict was unprecedented, drawing in regional powers and global attention alike. Iran, facing severe military strain, sought to maintain its defense through innovative and unconventional means. Many of the aircraft and equipment provided by the United States in the early stages of the war were no longer operational. Spare parts were scarce, and the Iranian military turned to alternative sources, including black markets in Vietnam, Amsterdam, and Singapore. Despite being officially designated as a state sponsor of terrorism by the United States, Iran successfully navigated these restrictions, maintaining its military capabilities under extremely challenging conditions. The war soon escalated beyond conventional battlefields. Iranian and Iraqi forces began targeting civilian populations. Tehran and Baghdad became frequent targets of missile strikes. By 1986, both nations had begun attacking each other's oil tankers in the Persian Gulf, seeking to undermine the opponent's economic lifelines. This escalation of warfare at sea, alongside the extensive bombardment of cities, marked a dangerous turning point. Chemical weapons entered the conflict in 1986. Iraq, possessing chemical capabilities, used them to inflict devastating damage on Iranian forces and civilian populations alike. These attacks drew condemnation from the international community, yet they underscored the brutal lengths to which Saddam Hussein's regime would go to achieve strategic advantage. By 1987, in the seventh year of the conflict, Iran sought to expand its diplomatic and strategic partnerships. Iranian leaders traveled to Moscow to negotiate with Soviet officials and contractors. The aim was to counter Iraq's military advantages, particularly its access to Russian weapons. The Soviet Union, while cautious, agreed to mediate, which temporarily de-escalated attacks on urban centers. This Soviet-mediated intervention led to a pause in attacks on cities. Iraq ceased targeting Iranian urban areas, and Iran reciprocated, allowing some relief for civilian populations. However, the war had already caused immense damage. Thousands of Iranians had died, entire neighborhoods were destroyed, and Iraq had also suffered substantial losses, although comparatively fewer civilians perished. During this time, Iran recognized the urgent need for advanced weaponry. Conventional means were insufficient to counter Iraq's chemical weapons and military capabilities. Pakistan, having developed significant nuclear and centrifuge technology, became a critical partner. Although Pakistan's leadership initially hesitated to provide nuclear assistance, scientific cooperation eventually took place. Pakistani experts shared critical knowledge on centrifuge designs and nuclear processes, allowing Iran to develop the foundation for a more technologically advanced military infrastructure. In 1987, tensions escalated beyond the battlefield. During the Hajj pilgrimage, Iranian demonstrators staged a protest in Saudi Arabia, aiming to spread their revolutionary ideology. The demonstration turned violent after clashes with Saudi security forces, resulting in the deaths of over 400 people and thousands injured. Most casualties were Iranian pilgrims. This incident permanently strained Iran-Saudi relations and caused diplomatic isolation for Iran, while further deepening regional tensions. Meanwhile, naval warfare intensified. The United States, along with Britain and France, deployed forces to protect oil shipments in the Persian Gulf. Iranian attacks on commercial tankers prompted international intervention, complicating the war and drawing global attention. By now, Iran's capacity for prolonged offensive operations had diminished. The cumulative effect of chemical attacks, foreign military intervention, and declining civilian morale left Iran increasingly vulnerable. By 1988, Iran faced repeated missile attacks on Tehran. Civilians evacuated to remote areas to avoid bombardment. Iraq, meanwhile, resumed chemical weapons attacks, targeting towns along the border. One attack alone destroyed an entire city, killing thousands within 48 hours. These actions highlighted the brutality of the war and the growing desperation of the combatants. An accidental American attack in the Persian Gulf, which targeted an Iranian passenger ship carrying civilians, intensified hostilities. 20 civilians died, reinforcing Iranian perceptions that the United States had directly entered the war against them. After 8 years of continuous conflict, both Iran and Iraq were exhausted. International pressure, particularly from the United Nations, led to the adoption of Resolution 598, which called for a ceasefire. On August 20, 1988, the Iran-Iraq War officially ended. Neither side achieved its original objectives. Iran failed to force Saddam Hussein from power, and Iraq could not secure the territorial gains it sought. The human cost of the war was staggering. Approximately 200,000 Iraqis lost their lives, while Iranian casualties were slightly less but equally catastrophic. Both nations faced extensive economic destruction, loss of infrastructure, and the depletion of military resources. Despite these losses, the war had significant unintended consequences. Iran's military became highly professionalized. Soldiers were battle-hardened, trained in advanced tactics, and prepared to handle chemical warfare and other modern combat technologies. Revolutionary zeal increased among the Iranian population, consolidating ideological influence and regional presence. Iraq, although successful in using chemical weapons, saw its long-term strategic position weakened. Saddam Hussein's reliance on brutal tactics and the extensive human and material costs of the war created vulnerabilities for his regime. Both nations emerged from the conflict militarily capable, yet politically and economically weakened. The conflict also altered the regional power structure. Saudi Arabia, seeking to counter Iran's influence, strengthened its alliances with Western powers and expanded its regional role. The Iran-Iraq War underscored how prolonged ideological and territorial conflicts in the Middle East could destabilize entire regions while drawing in global powers. Ultimately, the war demonstrated that protracted conflicts, even when motivated by ideology, come at immense costs. Millions of people were affected, economies devastated, and entire generations shaped by violence and loss. Both nations emerged as militarily capable, yet politically and economically weakened. The Iran-Iraq War, lasting from 1980 to 1988, remains one of the most significant conflicts of the 20th century in the Middle East. Its consequences continue to shape regional dynamics, military strategies, and international diplomacy. Both nations emerged as cautionary examples of how ideology, leadership, and strategic ambition can lead to catastrophic human and economic costs. In conclusion, the Iran-Iraq War was not merely a territorial dispute. It was a complex interplay of ideology, regional ambition, and global interests. It reshaped the Middle East, leaving behind a legacy of military evolution, political realignment, and social trauma. For students of history, military strategy, and international relations, this conflict offers critical lessons on the devastating effects of prolonged warfare and the intricate balance of power in a strategically vital region.